to urge all delegates and notify them that the interpretation facility is active. And lastly, that any delegate who wishes to speak must use the raise your hand function or raise your hand icon. Having said that, I'm informed that there will be no notices of motion or motions without notice. So honorable delegates, in accordance with Council Rule 2471, there will be no notice of motion or motions without notice. We will now proceed to the order of the day. That is the report on Select Committee on Finance, 2020 revised and proposed fiscal framework dated the 10th of November 2020. I now call on Honorable Njadu to present the committee report. Honorable Njadu.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable A. Masondo, and I also acknowledge the Chairperson of the Finance Committee, Honorable Yunus Karim, and also acknowledge the Chief Whip of the House, Honorable S. Mohai. Chairperson, report of the Select Committee on Finance on the 2020 revised and proposed fiscal framework dated 10 November 2020. Having considered the 2020 medium-term budget policy statement of the Minister of Finance on the 20th revised fiscal framework and 2021, 2022 to 2023-2024 proposed fiscal framework, the Select Committee on Finance reports as follows. The Minister of Finance, Minister Tito Mboweni, tabled the 2020 revised fiscal framework and the proposed 2021 medium-term framework in line with the relevant provisions of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure, Related Matters Act Act 9 of 2009, Money Bills Act on 28 October 2020. The Minister further virtually briefed the Committees of Finance and Appropriations of both houses on 29 October, accompanied by the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, and the National Treasury team. The committee received an analysis and submissions on the revised and proposed frameworks from the statutory bodies, the Parliamentary Budget Office PBO, and the Financial and Fiscal Commission FFC on the 3rd of November. The committee invited public comments on the MTBS and received written and oral submissions on the 4th of November. From the Congress of the South African Trade Unions, COSATU, the South African Institute of Chartered Accounts, SAICA, the organizations Undoing Tax Abuse, OTA, the Fiscal Cliff Study Group, FSG, the Healthy Living Alliance, HILA, the Mr. Peter Micken written submission were received from the Budget Justice, from the Justice Coalition, BGC, the Grant Campaign, the Kaiser Capital Partners, the Dear South African Campaign, Old Mutual Investment, and Amanda Moby. Honorable Chairperson, the committee observations and recommendations on the 2020 revised and proposed fiscal framework. The 2020 revised and proposed fiscal framework has been tabled merely 3 months after the adoption of the 2020 special adjustment budget that was passed by Parliament in July 2020. The special adjustment budget was presented in response to the health and socio-economic crises worth by the COVID-19 global pandemic. The committee recommends that this report be read with observations and recommendations in its special adjustment budget and the 2020 fiscal framework reports where relevant. The 2020 MTBS is themed Securing Economic Recovering Beyond COVID-19 and complements the third phase of the social economic measures announced by the President Ramaphosa in March and April this year in response to the COVID-19 lockdown and almost complete shutdown in economic activity. It was also presented after the economic reconstruction and recovering plan. The ERRP was tabled in Parliament by the President, debated and adopted in October. The ERRP focus on building infrastructure, expanding electricity generation, allocating the digital spectrum, and supporting rapid industrialization and employment, among others. It also seeks to ensure the implementation of the long-term structural reforms such as modernizing network industries, reducing barriers to entry, and increase regional integration and trade, which the government plans to implement over the medium term and longer. The committee noted that a detailed implementation schedule has been developed and will be overseen by a council chaired by the President. The committee further notes the announcement of Operation Vulindlela, an initiative between the Presidency and the National Treasury that will support the implementation of the ERRP. In this regard, the committee strongly recommends that there be a clear implementation plan that can be monitored for the ERRP, which measure timelines and outcomes. It also believes that all relevant departments and entities of government will align their strategies and annual plans with the priorities and objectives of the ERRP. The committee will invite National Treasury for a more detailed briefing on Operation Vulindlela and the implementation plan of the ERRP. The committee notes that although numbers of statistics South Africa reflect that the unemployment rate has decreased from 29.0% to 23.3%. There are actually more people, 5.2 million of working age, who are currently inactive, as about 2.2 million people lost their jobs, and many businesses shut down during the COVID-19 lockdown. The committee notes therefore that the decrease in the unemployment from 29.0 to 23.3% is a result of the narrow definition of the concept of employment, and that unemployment has actually increased. The committee believes that this will exaggerate inequality and poverty and calls for a more rapid and focused implementation of the ERRP. The committee welcomes that the ERWP focuses on a industrialization and localization as some of the key pillars of our national reconstruction and inclusive economic recovering strategy. The committee believes that there should be significant emphasis on building our domestic productive capacity, and value for money must always remain a key consideration. There also need to be a key local campaign for the state, private sector, and consumers in these regards. The committee once again reiterates its recommendation that members of the executive and government officials should use cars manufactured or assembled in South Africa for official use. While the committee notes that the assigning of the high demand digital spectrum and reduction the cost of broadband and other cost of doing business forms part of the measures of the ERRP, it is still concerned at the slow pace of the outcoming auctioning of the digital spectrum and the persistent high cost of broadband to consumers. The committee reiterates that the National Treasury needs to engage with the Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services on this. Given the desperate need for revenue, the committee urges government to accelerate the auctioning of the digital spectrum. Chairperson, the committee notes that the country's economic outlook has unspiritually deteriorated. Further, since the tabling of the special adjustment budget in June, real GDP is now expected to contract by 7.8%, compared to 7.2%. GDP growth is expected to rebound to 3.3% and moderate at 1.7% and 1.5% in 2022 and 2023 respectively. The committee believes that government alone cannot ensure that necessary economic growth. Parliament, the private sector, trade unions, other sections of civil society, and the public all have a role to play. However, government has to lead in this regard, and policy certainty is imperative in order to revive business confidence and stabilize investment. The committee notes that the revenue projections have been downwardly revised from those of budget 2022, the special adjustment budget. The consolidated revenue is expected to decline from 1,398.0 trillion projected in the 2020 budget to 1,276.7 trillion in the MTPS, a decline of 121.0 billion. The gross tax revenue is expected to be 17.9%, lower than collections in 2019-2020.
As you conclude, Honorable Njadu.
As I conclude, Chair, the committee notes the government's consolidated expenditure as a percentage of GDP is projected to increase 3.9% or 1.85 trillion. Chairperson, lastly, the committee will encourage all members to familiarize themselves with the context of this report, as this report is a cross-cutting over all departments. In this regard, the committee reiterates that call for National Treasury to expenditure table of the public procurement bill. The committee further encourages. Then, lastly, Chair, this
Chief,
is
listen.
the Chair of the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Njadu.
Pains my heart. Thank you very much, Honorable Njadu. I now put the question. The question is that the report be agreed to. But before we do that, before we proceed to voting, I shall now allow provinces the opportunity to make their declarations of the vote in terms of Rule 71, if they so wish. And just as a reminder, a maximum of 3 minutes is allowed per declaration. Can we find out if any province wishes to make a declaration? If none, oh yeah, I see.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? I thought there was a speakers list for those who made declarations. I'll start. Honourable Chairperson, the report presented for deliberation is a carbon copy of the Portfolio Committee's report entrenching the perception that this House is a mere rubber stamping formality for the ANC. We will not be part of that. We reject this report based on procedure alone. To get to the detail of the report, the Western Cape has some serious issues to raise. There is a total misunderstanding of the technical details behind the recent report of lower unemployment. The real reason for the decline in unemployment is due to the narrow definition of unemployment requiring a person to be looking for work to be recorded. This was impossible in lockdown. The result is a statistical anomaly based on a controversial definition that point must be made to make this paragraph reflective of the truth. The fiscal framework introduces some serious budget cuts as demanded by the current climate. Since many of the budget cuts are related to employee compensation and therefore reliant on a court process, it is not fully understood whether, should that court decision not be in favor of government, the cuts to each department will be reversed in order to ensure that salaries are paid in compliance with the court order. This is going to impact the DORA bill as well. Are we to expect a further adjustment budget later in the financial year? The report addresses the uncertainty of the bailout of SAA and suggests waiting for the next quarterly briefing for information. This does not enable any member of this committee nor the House to make an informed decision when choosing whether to support this framework or not. The matter is a key policy issue. Allocating funding in this quantum would be irresponsible without this briefing. The Minister should inform us before we approve the framework. Time constraints are not our doing and should not be an excuse. The Western Cape rejects this report and demands further clarity on the fiscal framework before we can agree to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Abskakne. Let's proceed and see if there's any other province wishing to make a declaration.
Yes, Chairperson, Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga, yes. We'll proceed to Mpumalanga. Honorable member from Mpumalanga, let's hear the declaration.
Thank you, Chairperson, honorable members, for the opportunity. Mpumalanga Province supports the division of revenue bill as presented by the Minister of Finance. We are cognizant of the serious economic and fiscal environment in which the bill is introduced to the House. It is for this reason that we agree with principal objective to reignite economy and return to public finance to a sustained position. The provincial government takes note of the reduction in the equitable share, but equally welcomes additional resources to various types of conditional grants as indicated in the bill.
Just a quick thing.
The allocation of resources, especially towards the presidential employment initiative, is most welcome, as it will assist us to save jobs and intervene through expanding public employment programs to young people in the province. Chairperson, as prescribed in the bill, we will ensure that provincial departments report on implementation of this initiative accurately and timelessly to the presidency. The fiscal consolidation will be the most difficult but necessary intervention to secure a future of the next generation that is free from unsustainable burden. We have to make the economic recovery plan work. It is the only hope we have for inclusive growth and development in our country. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson. We support the bill.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. We will now proceed to the next declaration. Any
Yes.
province wishing to make a declaration?
Yes, KZN, Chairperson.
Okay, so then let's proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've been asked to speak on behalf of our province. Firstly, I obviously serve on the committee as well, so it makes it a bit easier to respond to Ms. Labuschagne. The first thing to stress is that most certainly it's not a rubber stamp. We have put many issues before this process in the committee processing of the MTBPS, the fiscal framework in particular, the revised fiscal framework, that make it very clear it's not a rubber stamp. We've never been a rubber stamp. But obviously, the issues are far more complex than Ms. Labuschagne makes out. The interesting thing is they offer very few, if any, alternatives the DA does. And what, in fact, Ms. Labuschagne said is exactly the same issues that were raised by the DA yesterday when we finalized the very report that is the subject of the discussion today. And we looked at them. In fact, we agreed with some of them. So, for example, on the unemployment figures, we agree that because people are unable to search for work during the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, the narrow definition is not helpful. We agree. She's right. The DA is right. Nobody disagrees with that. And to my knowledge, that is to some extent covered by what Mr. Njadu said. Perhaps not as explicitly as they want, the DA, but we agree with that. That's not a quibble. On the public sector wage bill, again, we've addressed that issue in our report. They raised the matter. We asked for responses. Many of us came back and said, firstly, as National Treasury likely says, this is a matter not before National Treasury, but the Public Service and Administration Ministry and Department. They're dealing with that. Secondly, there's a public sector wage bargaining processes. Ms. Labuschagne and ourselves have passed issues between labor and government. All we can do, as we've been doing, is stressing to them that they need to negotiate in good faith in a give and take approach where each side make concessions, taking into account COVID-19 circumstances and the need to manage the different needs and interests of different departments and different spheres of government. So we have said to Treasury, indeed, that look, if the court process is against the favor of government, if it supports the union movement, what will you do? We presume you will negotiate, failing which the matter will have to come before Parliament. So we must respect the very laws we've passed. It does not, I do not anticipate, nor does our committee, nor does the majority, at least in the committee, that we will end up being a mediator between government and labor. The labor relations dispensation is there for that. Obviously, National Treasury is not naive. There must be a plan B in some sense. Hopefully it won't come back, won't come to that. And then on the matter she raises, the fourth matter she raises, it's not a quarterly briefing by any means. Sorry about that, Chairperson. She's right, and we agree. But the issue is that Parliament does rise. This is the last quarter of a year in early December. Now, we can do so much and no more. Apart, Ms. Labuschagne, from the fact that there's much done in previous briefings that already cover the issues. There's a full briefing done. There's the most transparent and open documents that this government has got. And in fact, it's recognized by world authorities as amongst the top 3 in the world in respect of its openness and transparency of budget information. Those things help us to deal with the matter. Moreover, this is a medium-term budget policy statement dealing with a framework. We also have tax bills to deal with, all of which we have to finish before the first week of December. So we take all that into account. What we want to finally say, Chairperson, is that this is a joint report. NA and NCOP have to, in terms of the Money Bills Act, adopt the same report. However, it's recognized that we make many decisions there in what Mr. Njadu said. Now, we have to have our own program of action, not only hold the executive to account, ourselves to account for the decisions we've taken. Now, unfortunately, some of the issues raised in the joint report do not belong to the NCOP. We cannot do what the NA does. We're not another National Assembly Mark II or Brand 2. We are a separate, independent house, and our main focus is on the 3 spheres of government and the interest particularly of the provinces, and of course also local government. Finally, we repeat, we're in a very difficult, perilous, powerless situation. This is the first major pandemic and far worse than that in 1918. So here it is. We must have our differences, indeed. That's what a multi-party democracy is. But ultimately, we all have a common interest in working together to rescue this country. Let's do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Karim. Is there any other province wishing to make a declaration? Any other province wishing to make a declaration? None. So we shall then move on and proceed to voting on the question. And the question is that the report be adopted. I now call upon the provinces to cast their votes on the order, and when called upon, heads of delegations must indicate whether they vote in favor, against, or abstain. Will do so alphabetically, in alphabetical order. So the first province is the Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape.
The Eastern Cape is Eastern Cape iyayichasa report.
Eastern Cape cast report. The Free State.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Free State vote in favor of the report. Thank you.
In favor. Free State. Gauteng.
Gauteng votes in favor.
Gauteng vote in favor of the report. KwaZulu-Natal.
iKwaZulu Natal iyayeseka sihlalo i-report.
KwaZulu-Natal iyayeseka. Limpopo.
Limpopo support in favor, Chairperson.
Limpopo supports. Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga support.
Mpumalanga supports. Northern Cape.
Northern Cape supports, Chair, in favor.
Northern Cape in favor. Northwest.
Northwest fully support. Same some. Who's voting on Northwest there?
Northwest, stem some. Sort out your own issues.
I'm the only head of delegation.
Supports. Western Cape.
The Western Cape does not support the report.
Western Cape against. The voting is now closed, and 8 out of 9 provinces support voted in favor and support the report. I therefore declare the report is adopted in accordance with section 65 of the Constitution. So the report is agreed to. Let me take this opportunity to thank everyone for having attended this sitting, and we note in particular that Sarga has sent a delegation. It is represented, and your presence is truly appreciated. Honorable delegates, that concludes the business of the day. The House is now adjourned.
Thank you, Nyambos.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes,
Thank you.
Chair, I'm not removed. Northwest.
Sisters.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kudu kudu.
Re leboga kudu. Re leboga ngamanda.
Amanda. Hey.
I can, sir.
Rilebuhile.
Chief Whip. Re leboga
Honorable Chief
ngamanda.
Whip.
Pena witsa.
Mamgwenye.
Winda.
Sangidumela la. Hello. Malibongwe. Kamalabo mama nabo baba bawo. Yebo. 30 minutes. Done. Thank you. Asambeni sobala amavoti asiyeni.
Karim, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chairperson Karim.
Achieving equality and the supremacy of the Constitution, which was adopted in 1996. In 2014.
Thank you.
Kindani.
Yes, ma'am. Hey, how are you, Honorable? Oh, Councillor Charles. How are you? I'm good. Your mic is muted.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you very much for attending.
Thank you very much. You see, today I was full house with my logo. It must appear in Parliament House.
Yeah, I could see that beautiful place of yours.
It's beautiful, you see. Thank you very much. Eh?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm sure we are fine. Huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was the shortest sitting I've
Yes,
ever witnessed. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. We are ready for tomorrow.
Let me check first if the streaming is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it off? Off.
Are you done, Madhu?
We're still streaming on YouTube.